What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. This week we're on a mission to find the blackest black ink out there. Last week I put out a poll asking what your favorite blacks were, and today we're testing the top 5 based on those results. Now, I've seen many people out there discussing their favorite black inks, but nobody's really ever shown any examples. So I thought, let's put them to the test on actual skin. Of course, we have to have an additional twist here, and I'm not going to know which black ink I'm using until the very end. You know, just so we have an unbiased review. I am super excited about this experiment, so let's get started. First and foremost, I want to thank my live canvas, Tom Ozvath. Tom is an amazing tattooer, but today, it's his turn. Now, before we get started, let's talk about how we're going to be testing each one of these inks. Each of these inks were transferred into an unlabeled bottle by my lovely assistant Ryan, and only he knows which one is which. And the 5 inks being used in today's experiment are Allegory Black, Solid Ink Heavy Black, Panthera XXX, Dynamic Black, and Intense Super Black. To keep this experiment consistent, we'll be testing all of the inks the exact same way using 3 different methods. First, we're going to test lining. We'll pull 3 different lines, the first one being our 3-liner, the second being our 9-liner, and finally the last line with our Fat Boy 18-liner. Ideally, when looking for a good lining ink, we are not only looking for something that's dark, but its ease of use and how clean those lines come out. Next, we're going to work on black saturation. This one is a simple test. We're going to make solid black circles with each ink to see which one saturates the easiest and goes in the darkest. Finally, we're going to have a gradient test to see which one has the most dynamic range. We'll see how these things transition from solid black to just 1 drop black. Typically, on a normal day, I would use 5 different washes, but with this experiment in particular, we're just going to use 4. Also, before anybody starts ripping me in the comments, I know that not all black inks are created equal. Some are designed specifically for lining, and some are meant for solid blackouts. However, as artists, we rarely get the opportunity to have a side-by-side comparison with some of the more popular inks out there. Oh, one more thing. We've got to see how these things heal, right? So make sure to stick around to the end of the video where we have Tom come back in 1 month to see how these have settled in and see if our opinions change. All right, enough talking. Let's get to sticking. Damn. Now we're going to be starting with E and working our way over to A, just for sake of not smearing the stencil. Now, just so you guys know, I have each of my machines wrapped in a different color tape, my liner being in green. Ooh, I'm excited. Okay, sick. Nice little thin line for E. Felt a little bouncy, that turkey meat skin. All right, next we're going to work on the saturation test, and for that circle I'm going to use my 9-liner. All right. Now let's move on to filling in that circle, and with that filling in, we're going to use my packer, which is taped in orange. I'm using a flat mag to fill in the circle just so we can get nice and close to those edges. We have a black circle. And finally, for the gradient rectangle, we're going to be using my shader, which is wrapped in blue. Damn, that shader packs in that black, especially with that flat mag. That thing is crispy. All right, let's repeat that process 4 more times and then we'll check out the results. I think one of the weirdest things I'm experiencing in doing this is changing the cartridge out so often. That never happens. Now we're moving on to C, and C is definitely a lot thicker than these other two. See all those bad boy lines. Now herein lies the test. It seems like it is a little more difficult to put in these thinner tones compared to the other inks we've used so far. This shit is fucking thick, son. It's like tar. Okay, real quick, I want to take a break to give a shout out to the sponsor of my channel, Mad Rabbit. All their tattoo projects just recently went vegan, which makes me so happy, and you can check out all they have to offer at madrabbit.com. Don't forget while you're there to use code PONY20 to get 20% off of your entire order. All right, let's get back into it. Once again, Tom, thank you so much for being here and doing this with us. I had an absolute blast.
Me too, man. Thank you.
Of course. I feel like we learned a lot. Let's take a peek and see what this looks like. The first thing I notice are my lines aren't the greatest, but we're not doing a line test here, okay?
Yeah, but you know what? This is a good experiment because this skin is not the best skin to work with.
Yeah, that's true. Old Turkey Tom.
Turkey Tom.
Turkey skin Tom. And so if anybody does this in the future, we're just going to call this the Tom test from now on. If you guys do this at home, just call it the Tom test. Now, as we said earlier, a lot of inks have different uses. Some are more used for lining, some are more used for shading, and some are more used for solid blacks. If I had to pick an ink to outline with tomorrow, I would probably stay away from B, as with this experiment alone, I feel like I got more blowouts with B than any other of the inks. I think a lot of them were pretty similar when it came to outlining, especially with that lining machine. I feel like that thing really does the job and picks up any kind of extra slack that the ink may be holding it back. But I do feel like C maybe gave me the best, cleanest outlines.
C's got the nicest lines.
Now, as these sit right now, if I had to pick one for saturating, I think I would go for D, as that seems to have the most black pigment in the ink, although E did go in just as easy as D.
Well, I definitely feel like E went in the quickest as far as filling in solid black. As they look right now, it's hard to tell which one is the most black.
Yeah, as they sit right now, all the blacks look the same.
Because like you get different lighting reflecting off of them, so it's hard to tell until it heals.
Now when it comes to the gradient test, I feel like that's where we see the biggest difference because some of these stayed black throughout the entire gradient, whereas some really fell short and started to lighten up not even halfway through. Now if there was an ink that I had to use for gradient shading tomorrow without knowing how any of these healed, that's a tough one. I feel like A has a pretty good gradient, and I feel like D, even though it's a bit dark, I feel like has a very smooth transition.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think A and D look the strongest to me. They might look a little dark right now, but when everything settles and heals and the redness goes away, I think they look very consistent, and I think those lights will end up healing up very nice.
All right, I think we're ready to make our guesses. Let's start with Allegory Black.
Oh man.
Which one do you think Allegory is? This is your daily driver, correct?
That's a tough one, yeah. I'm gonna have to say it's between A and D. Might be a little biased on that, but when I use it, it seems pretty black.
Yeah, I'd like it to be D. I think this is a bit too thin to be A. A felt very thick. So that being said, I'm gonna put this under E. What do you say it was?
I was thinking D. You're gonna say E?
I'm gonna say E.
All right. Well, how do we square this up?
Yeah, right. All right, up next we've got Solid Ink. This one definitely felt like the thicker one to me, which would lead me to believe that it's either A or C.
I'm gonna have to agree with you. I think it's gonna be A on that one, just because it seemed thick, but I feel like it wouldn't give you that light wash at the end, being so thick. I don't know.
I mean, I'm gonna have to go with A.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to
You want to go with A?
Yeah,
let's go with A. All right, next up we've got Panthera XXX. Now I like this ink a lot. I feel like it's got a really good gradient to it, so hopefully this doesn't prove me wrong. And let's see, the only thing that's holding me back from picking B is the outline test. So I'm gonna say it was D.
Yeah, I've never used that, but I've heard really great things about that ink. I'm gonna have to go with D too. I feel like you've used it before and you said it's good with the gradients. That D looks like it has one of the most consistent gradients.
It is very dark. Let's try D.
All right, next up we got Dynamic Ink. What did you think about this one?
Tried and true dynamic. I feel like every tattoo artist should know this one since I feel like most tattoo artists use this one on the daily, but it is a little thin. So I'm gonna say E.
I'm gonna have to go with E too. I mean, I use this a lot, but when I use it, I use the ratio of 20%, 40%, 60, and 80%. And usually I see a little bit darker light tones. So I'm gonna have to agree, it looks like it's gonna be E. All right, next we got the Super Black.
Now this one was definitely a lot thicker. This one was just as thick as the Solid Ink, but since I've never used Super Black, I don't really have a baseline. I'm gonna say it was C.
I'm gonna have to agree with you on that. I used this a long time ago, and I think that my tattoos were healing a little bit light. So off a guess, I'm gonna say that this one is C.
Which leaves us with B as the only thing not picked. So would you agree, should we try that as Allegory?
Let's try it. Looks consistent.
It looks good and consistent. Like I said, the only thing that holds me back from that is the blowout, but it is that location of the body that makes blowouts a lot easier to happen. But it does look very consistent, and since it is an ink that Tom and I both use and we both feel it's consistent, I think B's the winner.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that.
Are you ready?
Oh,
We're like all mixed up, bro.
I know, right? Let's get one right. Let's go for one right.
Right, one right.
All right, so we'll do this. A was Super Black.
No!
Solid.
So A was very black when I put it in. It was definitely a little harder to get in for my personal taste,
We thought that was solid.
but it is very black.
B was the black. You got that one correct.
Oh, you got it right.
We got one.
Nice.
Way to go.
C was Solid Ink.
We got those switched.
Flipped around.
All right, what's D?
Panthera. D Dynamic.
Tom, we almost got them all. That was a hell of a guess.
How many did we get? 3?
We got 3. We only switched up the Zuper and the solid ink, both of which were the thickest inks and hardest to work with.
This is the right order.
C was solid ink. That was the one I was least impressed with. I just wasn't impressed with the gradient that it had. Now, that being said, this could heal up to be one of the more dynamic ranges of ink, but as it sits right now, this one just definitely fell short in my opinion. All right, I guess the only thing to do now is wait and see how it heals. To the future. All right, we made it. And I'm back here with Tom to check out these results. It's been about 30 days, so let's see what this looks like.
All right.
Oh wow, there's quite a dramatic difference here. Well, the first thing I notice is column C, which is solid ink, definitely healed up a lot lighter than I expected. Even when it comes to that black circle, it is multiple shades lighter than the rest of them. If we look up towards the lines, don't mind the blowouts, I definitely think there is even a difference when it comes to the lines. Some of them definitely kind of blew out a little bit easier than others, and some kind of retain their shape a lot better than others.
I'd have to agree on that. Starting with column A, I don't know if I would use that ink for line work. You can't even tell the line weights in between the 3. As for column B, minus the small blowouts, you can at least see the different line weights in between the 3, and they look fairly consistent at the end.
Very much so. I'd have to agree. If it were on a different part of the body, I'd say we'd get a little bit more clean lines there, and they would definitely be more distinguishable.
Yeah, it's hard working on that stretchy skin. As for column C, I probably wouldn't use that ink for line work either. In my opinion, it looks a little bit thin, and if you look real close at the edges of the line work, you can see small blowouts, and that usually happens because the ink is very thin.
Even though I think that's some really thick ink, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's called solid ink. I think it was heavy.
Yeah, it was very heavy ink. But I think you're right. The edges of the lines aren't near as clean as, let's say, column B. Aside from the blowouts, of course. And hey, I know, I'm working on my lines. I got a new machine to help me out with that. I'm taking my own advice, okay? Now, as far as D goes, this is definitely one of my favorite sets of lines. You can definitely tell a distinguishable difference between those 3. They may not be as clean as column B, but I think that'd be a great ink for lining.
I'd have to agree with you on that. Looks very clean and consistent.
Now, as far as the lines in column E, I'd say they definitely look very similar to the lines in column D. Again, I'd say they could use a little bit of work, but I'd say that's my own fault.
If you were doing a line work tattoo today, what ink would you use?
I'd probably have to go with column D, which would be the Panthera ink, because I think those lines are probably some of the cleanest and definitely some of the darkest.
I have to agree with you. Out of all these columns, D looks the cleanest with line work.
Now, as far as the black circles go, when it was fresh, you could definitely tell that all those black circles looked very similar. But when we look over at the healed photo, that middle circle looks way lighter than the rest of the 4. For some reason, it just looks almost gray rather than solid black. But as far as the other 4 blacks go, they do all look pretty similar. Maybe just stay away from solid black if you're trying to do something that's very dark. Now, I think the biggest difference that we notice is when we look down at these gradients. Some definitely healed a lot lighter than others. And that's kind of what we thought when we did the tattoo. I kind of knew that C, the solid ink, was going to heal a bit lighter, but I didn't know it was going to heal that light. And sometimes healing light is good. You can have more of a dynamic range. Like if we were to look at the last column, which is dynamic, respectively, there is definitely a lot more dynamic range to that one compared to the others. However, I like column A because it did heal very dark and it just transitions to that lighter tone a bit more smooth. Now, when I tattooed these, my intention wasn't to make a smooth gradient, but rather see the differences that each cap would make. So that's why when I did the very solid blacks on the bottom, I just kept them very rectangular and I didn't push any of those shades up toward the middle. But obviously when I got to the lighter tones of each gradient, I pushed them off just to make sure we could see how it would fade into the skin. Well, I definitely have to say that we agree when it comes to our least favorite ink being column C, which is solid black. And again, that might work for somebody's work style, but maybe not so much for me. What do you think?
I think A is the smoothest when it comes to shades. I think E is the most dynamic when it comes to range, so I would have to go with either A or E. That's super black or dynamic black.
So if you're looking for the blackest black, I would have to say stick with A, Zuper, or D, Panthera. However, if you're new to the game or you're looking for something more versatile, I would probably personally stick with D, which is Panthera.
I gotta agree with you on the blackest black, but when it comes to the way that I tattoo, I think dynamic would suit my style the best. I think it has consistent lines, a smooth gradient, and if you're looking for that solid black, it's there.
Well, I'd have to say my biggest takeaway from this is that not all inks are created equal. And you can obviously tell when it comes to the healed photo. And it's not often that we get to see our tattoos healed up a month from now, a year from now, or so on. So this was pretty eye-opening for me. And I know it's not scientific, but I think this gives us all a good baseline to start with. And I learned a lot. So be sure to test these out yourself because you may have a different result. And remember, not all skin is the same. Somebody that is more melanated might require a thinner ink. The thicker inks might end up being more choppy. It's just something you have to experiment and practice with. So Tom, in the name of tattooing, thank you so much for being a part of this. Please check out Tom's work. He's an amazing tattooer.
Don't forget to subscribe.
See y'all next week.